This video tells the incredible true story of how one man completely destroyed one of Wales's most successful football teams, and how the fans of the club refused to give up and accept defeat. This video features multiple relegations, multiple manager sackings, multiple moments of insane delusion, a homeless Chinese man in his underpants, and much, much more. This is the story of Barry Town Football Club's decade of hell. Yo guys, Narera here, and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like as it massively helps the channel, and if you want to see more, hit subscribe as I've got a lot of other interesting videos planned. Without further ado, let's get into the video. To most of you watching, the name Barry Town may mean absolutely nothing to you. Some of you in the UK may recognise it as the town where the hit show Gavin and Stacey was set, but to those involved in Welsh football, Barry Town was once a football club to be feared. They had a spell of complete dominance between 1995 to 2003 that saw them lift the league title 7 times in 8 seasons. They even managed to beat Portuguese giants Porto at their stadium Jenna Park, with footballing legends such as Chelsea's Ricardo Carvalho and Helder Postiga playing for the opposition. Okay, they lost the first leg 8-0 and Porto made 10 changes to their team, but it still counts as arguably the best result from a team playing in the Welsh leagues, and it was a monumental upset. However, this success came at a cost, and as Barry invested heavily trying to compete in Europe, big debts were piled up. Players such as Adebayo Akinfenwa were brought in and given big wages, and former England footballer John Fashanu was given a brief stint as chairman, and the costs eventually became unsustainable for a team playing in a league as obscure as the Welsh Premier League. The club was in serious danger of going out of business in 2003 unless they found a buyer willing to inject £100,000 into the club to save them. With the club desperate for a hero, Barry's knight in shining armour arrived as unknown barrister Stuart Lovering purchased the club and promised to run it properly, as he recognised the devastating impact losing the local football club can have on a town. Little did Barry Town realise at the time quite what they had gotten themselves into. The new owner immediately raised eyebrows in Barry when, just months after taking over the club, Lovering announced plans to build Barry a massive 40,000-seater stadium. That's a stadium bigger than 9 teams in the Premier League, despite the club averaging around 500 fans at games. That 40,000-seater stadium would look even more ridiculous when Barry Town were relegated to the second tier with games to spare. Things got even stranger when Lovering announced he was contemplating playing himself in the final game of the season before presumably sobering up and realising what a ridiculous idea that was. It was early days, but some Barry Town fans were already starting to worry about the man who is in complete control of their football club. With the club now preparing for life in the second tier of Welsh football, the owner unbelievably decided to massively increase ticket prices, making them the most expensive in all of Welsh football. In fact, the tickets were so expensive that it only cost £3 less to watch neighbours Cardiff City play in the English Championship. With the club still in financial turmoil, Barry's loyal supporters club banded together to raise £4,000 for club finances, no small figure for Welsh football. Unbelievably, Lovering responded to this by banning the supporters club from fundraising at the team's ground, and then claimed the supporters club was no longer official. He announced plans to replace the now unofficial supporters club with his own one, with branches all across Wales and, of all places, Latvia. Yes, Latvia. Now, unless there's a legion of Barry Town fans all across Latvia that I'm completely unaware of, I think it's fair to say this is a bit of a random market for a Welsh team to target, but okay. Not satisfied with angering his entire club's fan base, next on Lovering's agenda of madness was an unpopular rebrand of the club's badge, followed by the sacking of popular manager Colin Addison, who Lovering described as a prima donna. With many fans and players alike upset with the sacking, Lovering decided to call a meeting to explain his reasons behind the sacking. This meeting was abruptly ended when Lovering exited to take a phone call and didn't return. At a game a few weeks later, a new range of merchandise is advertised in the match programme, the highlight being Barry Town branded thongs. I looked around and funny enough I couldn't find another football club selling their own branded thongs, so I guess Stuart Lovering was a bit of a trailblazer in this area of football. Despite the complete ridiculousness occurring off the field, the new manager David Hughes actually had the club right back in the mix for promotion to the Welsh Premier League about halfway through the season. Lovering responded to this by slashing the manager's playing budget, and an outraged David Hughes immediately quit. Lovering hired his replacement and then immediately restored the playing budget back to what it was before David Hughes quit. Now, why you would do this, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is some DJ Khaled style suffering from success disease that Lovering managed to contract. But other than that, I'm all out of ideas, to be honest. The guy's just a weirdo. Literally 1 month after this, news breaks that Lovering has run up huge debts with the local council who own the club stadium, Jenner Park. Rather than settle these debts, Lovering decides it would be easier just to move the club 45 miles away from Barry to Treforest. That's a similar distance to the one between Milton Keynes and Wimbledon. Crowds predictably shrink to as small as 20 fans at a game, and who can blame them? Who's travelling 45 miles just to watch Barry Town play with an owner that you hate? The lack of attendance has an immediate severe impact on the club's finances, and the playing budget is again slashed, this time to £0, meaning Barry has become a team full of amateurs being paid nothing, a far cry away from their European days as a fully professional club. The bad news just kept on coming as it emerged that although Lovering had claimed to be a barrister when buying the club, he had actually been disbarred, meaning he could no longer legally practice law due to misconduct. With the club in complete and utter disarray, a section of supporters decide enough is enough and set up their own club. Lovering is furious with this and threatens to sue both the players and supporters of the new club for impersonating Barry Town, but like many of his threats, plans, he never follows through. Just 2 years after he bought the club, the immensely unpopular Stuart Lovering announced Barry Town was for sale. Despite the club being relegated, rebranded and effectively homeless, Lovering demanded $400,000 for the club. That's more than 3 times what he had paid when it was a Premier Division club. That's like buying a car, crashing it, stealing the radio and then offering it back to the dealership for 3 times the price. Despite the stupid asking price, a number of serious buyers contact the club hoping to negotiate a more realistic price considering Barry Town's perilous situation, but all bids are rejected. The club is at least finally allowed to move back to Jenner Park after nearly 2 years away when Lovering finally settles his dispute with the local council. The club's first season back at Jenner Park is a disaster, and a previously unthinkable relegation to the third tier becomes more and more of a reality. In January 2007, with the club heading for relegation, Stuart Lovering appears in the local newspaper demanding Wales manager John Toshak calls up one of his players to the Welsh national team. For context, the Wales team at the time included the likes of Ryan Giggs, Gareth Bale and Craig Bellamy, and they definitely had zero interest in a player plying his trade at a club fighting for survival in the second tier of Welsh football. When Barry's relegation to the third tier is finally confirmed, Lovering fires the manager and quickly hires a replacement. The new manager meets with Lovering to discuss plans for next season, and he's so put off by what he hears that he decides to hand in his resignation days later, having never managed a game. So far, this video has essentially been a never-ending stream of disasters for Barry, but their luck finally turned a bit when Gavin Chesterfield was appointed as manager. To me, the story of Barry Town isn't just about Stuart Lovering, but also the people around the club that never gave up no matter what was thrown at them, and there is no man who defines this attitude more than Gavin Chesterfield. To say this man went on to become a club icon may be selling him short, as you'll see later in the video. But enough of the happiness, it's back to Stuart Lovering's wild ride of ridiculousness. Now if you're selling something and nobody's buying it, what would you do? With no buyers willing to meet the £400,000 asking price for the club, Lovering does what everyone would do in this situation and increases the asking price to £500,000. That's £500,000 despite the fact that the club had just been relegated to the third tier. This man is an absolute mastermind of negotiation, and he puts Donald Trump to shame with his talents in the art of deal making. Lovering's hokey-cokey in, out, shake it all about treatment of the playing budget continues when he randomly pulls the playing budget for a 5th time despite promising not to. This prompts 17-year club veteran David Cole, a man who'd previously said the only way he would leave Barry Town was in a coffin, to quit as club secretary due to a lack of trust. Lovering replaces Cole with his mum Barbara. In some countries, the third tier can still contain good teams, but in Wales the third tier is made up of what are essentially local village teams, meaning a club that previously shared Jenner Park with the likes of Porto and Dynamo Kiev was now playing weekly against footballing giants like Garden Village and Cardiff Corries, and that's just the teams with names I can pronounce. While Barry Town battled for promotion on the pitch, Lovering decided he couldn't wait and asked the Welsh FA to promote Barry 2 tiers back to the Premier Division, pay them $30,000 every year for playing in the Premier Division, and make them exempt from relegation. For some bizarre reason, the Welsh FA declined this insane offer. Even with this nonsense going on and constant tampering with his budget, Gavin Chesterfield managed to get the team promoted back to the second tier at the first time of asking. A delighted Stuart Lovering announced he expected the club to sell 1,000 season tickets next season. That's more than double their total average attendance when Barry Town was winning the Premier Division on a yearly basis. A few weeks after the promotion, Lovering had a brief stint in politics and ran for a spot on the same local council he'd been fighting with over Jenner Park. He notably decided against running in Barry and instead goes for a spot in Penarth, but finishes in last place with only 180 votes, and with that Lovering's political aspirations died a quick and sudden death. This defeat had a humbling effect on Lovering, and he decided to reduce the club's asking price to £250,000. This is still double what he originally paid despite the horrendous state he'd helped put the club in, and this price reduction came with a warning that if a buyer wasn't found within 5 weeks, he'd pull Barry Town out of the league. Those 5 weeks came and went without Lovering following through on his threat, but this would not be the only time he threatened to remove Barry Town from the league. Barry's first season back in the second tier got off to an awful start when they were deducted 3 points for not playing their game against Pontardawe. A month later, Lovering again reduced the asking price, this time to £200,000, but again this reduction was accompanied by a threat to pull Barry out of the league and essentially kill the club if a buyer was not found, as Lovering claimed he could not afford to keep running the club. This completely contradicts statements he was making in the media about how good the club's finances were looking under his watch, but whatever, I guess. With the asking price still too high and Lovering seemingly desperate to sell, hence his threats to kill the team, the Barry Town Supporters Committee agree a deal that sees them run the football side of the business while Lovering runs the social club. Lovering promises not to interfere with the football side of the business, and manager Gavin Chesterfield immediately leads the team on a 21-game unbeaten run to just miss out on promotion. Maybe if Barry hadn't been deducted 3 points early in the season, they could have even won promotion. Remember literally 10 seconds ago when I told you Stuart Lovering promised not to interfere with the football side of the business? Well, that lasted less than 6 months, before he demanded that any money made from the football side of the business be paid to him instead of reinvesting it in the team. At least long-time club secretary David Cole returned to the club with the supporters committee now more involved in the football side of the business, and with him and Gavin Chesterfield at the helm, things started to look potentially a bit more positive for Barry Town, even if the shadow of Lovering still loomed large over the club. A year after being seemingly desperate to sell the club and threatening to pull them out of the league if he didn't find a buyer, Lovering decides that actually the club is no longer for sale, and he plans to turn the clubhouse into a Buddha bar. Yeah, I really don't know either, and he doesn't follow through on the Buddha bar plans anyway, but I swear this guy just does whatever comes to his head at any time, whenever. The weirdness continues when a press job applicant is given a tour of Jenner Park and finds a homeless Chinese man in his underpants asleep on a dirty mattress inside the stadium. Such was the complete lack of care given to the facilities under Lovering. The applicant is given the job, and Lovering tells him he plans to make Barry Town as big as Fenerbahce, with crowds the same size as Cardiff City. The successful applicant is then fired 3 days later and replaced with none other than Stuart Lovering. Lovering's strategy of getting crowds the size of Cardiff City is to simply steal Cardiff's fans. He orders 1,500 leaflets to be handed out outside Cardiff Stadium before a game, advertising Barry Town's £50 season tickets. There's only one issue with this, being that Barry Town's season tickets actually cost £72, not £50. Fed up and frustrated with Lovering's continued desecration of their beloved club, the fans start the Stand Up for Barry campaign, hoping to shed light on what was taking place at their club, mostly via social media. This is how I originally actually ended up hearing about this story. Undeterred by this, Lovering continued his normal strategy of do completely random stuff and decided he wanted to turn the clubhouse into a cocktail bar now. This wasn't ridiculous enough, so he asked Barry's fans, the exact same ones he'd been terrorising for years and had just started a campaign against him, to chip in £20,000 for the renovations. And then to top that off, he also threatened to pull Barry out of the league again for the third time, but at this point this was just becoming a regular occurrence anyway. Again, while Lovering was busy doing Lovering things off the pitch, Gavin Chesterfield's team kept fighting in the second tier, but they were at a significant disadvantage due to their completely amateur status, playing against some semi-professional teams. Due to Lovering's continued threats to pull the team out of the league, the supporters committee agreed to finance the football side of the business themselves and immediately secure use of Jenner Park with zero involvement from Stuart Lovering. With the supporters committee now running everything football related, the love came back into Barry Town. As an example, the 4-page bare minimum effort programme became a much more comprehensive programme, with one edition even reaching as much as 44 pages of Barry Town content. Yet as the fans were pouring effort and love into the football side of the business, Lovering took completely the opposite approach to his duties, such as refusing to pay for the club website and telephone line, meaning both were disconnected. Nonetheless, the fans worked on and again secured use of Jenner Park for another season, and in the summer even volunteered their time to help clean up the stadium. While they were doing this, Lovering actually turned up, but instead of helping, he just moaned that they were painting the gates a colour he didn't like. Now, you can say what you want about Lovering, but you have to admit, he is remarkably consistent at being a twat in just about every situation. With Barry Town's completely unpaid squad top of the league in October, Lovering again threatens to pull them out of the league, even though this team was now costing him absolutely nothing and all costs were being shouldered by the supporters committee. He's reminded that only club secretary David Cole can actually pull the team out of the league, so he decides to fire David Cole and replaces him with none other than Stuart Lovering. Although this was what feels like the 84th time Lovering had threatened to pull the team from the league, this time the threat was taken much more seriously, as Lovering had began acting increasingly spiteful. Desperate to save the club, the supporters committee made a bid for the football side of the business, but it was immediately rejected by Lovering. Now this part is genuinely crazy. Against all odds, Gavin Chesterfield's side reached the 4th round of the Welsh Cup for the first time as a completely amateur team. As a reward for such an amazing achievement, Lovering decides to sack Gavin Chesterfield. Not only did he sack the manager responsible for the cup run, he also later tried to claim the £12,500 prize money for himself, despite making the supporters committee pay for absolutely everything, like the entrance fee, the travel costs, the accommodation costs. Like, imagine being the completely unpaid team, working your absolute balls off for this cup run, just for your efforts to result in a reward for the man killing your club. It's insane. The sacking of Chesterfield understandably created uproar, and backed by the supporters committee, Chesterfield refused to accept the sacking and continued to work as manager. What a hero this man is. Now, I can't say for sure as I'm not involved with the club, but I think this act of refusal was the final nail in the coffin for Barry Town, because Lovering quickly went from world's worst owner to a man hell-bent on destroying Barry Town. Lovering's strategy as club secretary was similar to his one for the whole club. Do absolutely nothing. As secretary, he was in charge of stuff like attending league meetings and organising games, all of which he completely refused to do, meaning fines were racked up which the supporters committee had to pay. Lovering rejected another supporter committee bid for the club, but this time he at least came out with a counter-offer. Unfortunately, like most things involving Stuart Lovering, it was a completely insane offer that would have essentially given him complete control over the club for years after the sale. Do I even need to say this was rejected? Like a complete child, Lovering continued to throw his toys out of the pram, stating the only secretary work he was willing to do was deregister players, cancel games, and pull Barry out of league and cups. At this stage, the writing was on the wall, and this spiteful man was hell-bent on killing the club, and there was absolutely nothing the supporters could do. They made a last-ditch bid for the club, but it quickly fell apart when Lovering refused to disclose the club's finances. The supporters committee later learned that when taking into account the huge debts the club had, the value was actually minus £100,000, meaning the club was so badly in debt it wasn't actually worth anything. A few months shy of Lovering's 10-year anniversary as club owner, what would have been previously unthinkable back in the glory days finally became reality. Despite Barry Town having a full squad ready to play their game against Tonpentre United, Lovering took it upon himself to call up the opposition and forfeit the game. He even phoned the referee, the council and the Welsh FA to tell them the game would not be happening. Ironically, probably the most work he's done for the club since he got there. The absolutely furious fanbase staged a sit-in protest at Jenner Park, but it was too late when a few days later Lovering finally followed through on his threats and pulled Barry Town out of the league. After a decade of torture and neglect, what was once Wales's most successful club was now officially dead. The fans had fought tooth and nail all the way and never gave up. But as fans of Newcastle United and Hull City will tell you, ultimately there's nothing you can do to stop an owner doing what they want with your club. And unfortunately in Barry Town's case, that was to kill the club. Despite the fact that he'd had offers on the table to sell the club, he decided instead to just kill it and get absolutely nothing back. Such was the amount of spite this man had for Barry. This might seem like a sad ending to the story, and you're right. If this was the ending, it would be incredibly sad. But it's not. Did you really think a fan base who went through 10 years of Stuart Lovering's wild ride and didn't give up would throw in the towel now? The supporters decided to form a new fan-owned club, Barry Town United, and what unfolded over the next few years was genuinely extraordinary. After a legal battle with the Welsh FA, the new club secured the right to start in the 4th tier of Welsh football and also secured the use of their stadium, Jenner Park. Despite the fact he'd now be managing 2 divisions lower through no fault of his own, Gavin Chesterfield decided to stay on as manager. He was joined by none other than David Cole, who was back where he belonged as club secretary. The club immediately won back-to-back promotions, and within 2 seasons they were back where they were when Barry Town was killed, and this time without the complete nutjob trying to derail them at every opportunity. After 2 seasons in the 2nd tier, the club won promotion to the Welsh Premier League, and after over a decade away from the division, they were finally back. In a weird way, Lovering finally killing the club was a blessing in disguise. It allowed the Phoenix club to blossom in a way that was never ever going to happen under Lovering. Since getting promoted back to the top flight, Gavin Chesterfield has led them to top 4 finishes in each of their 3 seasons, and he's even brought European football back to Jenner Park with a few Europa League games.
Barry Town United now average the 2nd highest attendance in Welsh football and have returned as one of the major football powers in the country. After suffering through one of the worst football owners in the history of the sport, Barry are back, and the name Stuart Lovering is nothing more than a bad memory. No longer is the future of the town's club in danger, and the same supporters who stuck with the club all the way through now own their club, and the future has truly never looked brighter for Barry Town. The end. If you've got this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like or share the video with a friend, as that will massively help the channel. If you want to see more videos like this on interesting sports stories, then hit subscribe, because I've got more videos planned. And as soon as this video goes up, I'm going to start work on my next video. If you have any video suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm always open to suggestions. Apologies for any bad editing or audio on this video. This is literally the first YouTube video I've ever made, and I kind of tried to learn editing on the job, so I know there's going to be some poor moments in there. I've listening back to it now, and I can hear, like, at certain points the audio sounds a bit different from when I've been recording in different rooms and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and iron those out for the next video, or over the next few videos. And that's about it. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.